Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, April 19th, 2019. That's two 19s. You know what to do. Go to the store, get yourself a ticket. You might as well get some good old American currency while it's still good. Yeah, what a day. Okay, it's Friday. That leaves us with only one thing to discuss. I mean, I don't think that there can be much discussion about anything, really, but the Mueller report and the aftermath, although there are plenty of stories that we could go to. Quite honestly, it would be an easy enough thing to do, to shift gears entirely. Let's see what we've got in store. And if I'm not mistaken, if I understood things correctly yesterday, our own Greg Dworkin is enjoying the first day of his retirement today. Usually, I don't know, I guess I was confused about it because I thought, Friday would be the last day in at work. But I guess not. So I guess I'll throw the door open, by the way, Greg, if you're bored because you've got nothing to do and you'd like to come on and discuss things here, we'll always welcome you here. You are no longer under restrictions from the workplace for your Friday appearances, and we do have to work out some sort of schedule for you. My suggestion is whatever you feel like doing that day would be pretty good, although I do depend on you on our Monday, Wednesday, Thursday slots. Don't disappear on me. I don't think you have any plans to do that. We can certainly rearrange something else, but doors open. Armando, the rest of you, please, by all means, send me what your thoughts are via tweet. Use the KITM hashtag so that things linger on screen a little bit. I'm trying a new experiment with two laptops side by side today, and I think actually it's making me nauseous, and this might not work at all. But I really don't know exactly how to approach the day. Did you read the report? I'm curious, just from a, just personally, I'm interested in how many of you might have spent the day trying to actually thumb through the report or read the whole thing. I guess since a third of it was redacted, it was actually a possibility. I'm not that focused a reader, typically speaking, and also by the time I get off the air here and get the things posted, I am fried in terms of actually like delving into something with focus. I dabble for the rest of the day and I watch what other people say and I view the rest of the day as my turn to listen to everybody else. The radio show in my head that goes on as I watch Twitter and the rest of you get a chance to chime in on what I should be talking about, and you usually program the next day's show for me that way anyway. Truth to tell, if you looked at Pocket today, I don't know, I think you'd probably send me to a psychologist, but what you would find is I probably put away 24 tweets, none of which I can understand exactly what the hell they say anymore, because when you put an article away, of course, the headline comes up and a photo that reminds you, the illustrating photo reminds you what the topic is. With tweets, I just have the name of the people and the fact that they said it on Twitter. All of these things were meaningful to me yesterday, and I have about two separate levels of organization here. The ones that I put away, I think, have a discussion of bits and pieces of the report that I thought were of top level importance that we ought to share today, in case you didn't get a chance to read all the way through it. Like me, you didn't get a chance to read all the way through it. I think Armando might have actually made an attempt at reading all the way through. I don't know whether Greg did. I guess he's got time on his hands now. But yesterday he was working, so probably not. So I thought I would share those tweets. And I guess the second level are things that when I got the feeling I had too many things in Pocket, I just was retweeting other people's tweets about these things. Again, just trying to sort of curate a timeline of the real-time collection of information from these 400 pages by, I don't know, a dozen plus people that I follow and am interested in and trust in one way or another. Not completely all the time necessarily, but certainly from time to time, and get their take on these things. Bill says that he did not get a chance either. He says, for what it's worth, I have not read the report yet, but I'm waiting for the Gilbert Gottfried audiobook. That I would pay no money for that. That would be fantastic. But it would be very fun, I think, to hear. I wonder what other celebrity voices might we want to hear this thing read aloud in. I understand that who told me about this? Let's see. I'll look this up and find it again. Oh, look at this. This is an interesting thing. I'm trying to retweet something already, and I got an unknown error. So that was very helpful. Twitter telling me the error is unknown, so I can't fix it. So that's too bad. But I'm pretty sure I can dig this up. And was it... yes, Darwin Darko. That's who I thought had sent me the thing, but I just wanted to be sure about this. A great suggestion, an interesting idea worth exploring. Vice News, apparently, as Darwin says, doing yeoman's work, reading the Mueller report out loud, word for word. Where were they doing that? And they were tweeting about it. It says, we're an hour into reading the Mueller report and only on page 34. So they were... I don't know, podcasting it. Maybe that's a great way of getting it read to me. Although I'd be curious about whether it's just a straight read. And I was thinking, that would be what a great way of using the expansive format that we have here on Daily Kos Radio, i.e. the I have no boss format. And should we do something like that? And it occurred to me almost immediately, we would never finish. There's no chance. We wouldn't have even gotten to page 34 in an hour. I couldn't get off page 1 without stopping to comment. And then I'd be reading your comments, and Armando would call it, and he'd comment, and Greg would. We'd never finish. So, I guess if they're just reading it out loud, kudos to them for having the ability to do that. There's no way I couldn't just stop and rage. Well, I'm probably about to do that right now, as a matter of fact. There's an awful lot in here, and an awful lot that I came away with, and amazing commentary from inside the Trump White House about this thing and everything. Let me go back and try and track down all the things that I wanted to say about everything. Oh, and I never did get to finish. I didn't finish a lot of things, but there was, the Forgotten Reason article that I was reading yesterday. Maybe this is a good way to kick things off, just to transition from yesterday. We were looking at Asha Rangapa's The Forgotten Reason Congress Needs to See the Mueller Report, and she started off by telling us the very commonly shared reason, which was a good reminder, and maybe we'll just start over again. This was news that Attorney General William Barr might have mischaracterized special counsel. Might have. I can't even read an article about the thing without stopping. Might have mischaracterized special counsel Robert Mueller's final report on obstruction of justice by the president has increased calls for Barr to release the report to Congress. Of course, he didn't do that yesterday either. It was full of redactions, as you know. I think now I'll have to stop for this commentary. One of the more absurd sets of redactions. Ordinarily, it might even be justifiable to have redacted, as they abbreviated it, HOM, harm to ongoing matters. In other words, releasing this material would harm ongoing investigations and their ability to perhaps prosecute at the end of the investigation. And so we don't want to undermine those investigations still ongoing. HOM, all these redactions. And, it left a lot of material out, and it's sometimes suspicious. And one of the more irritating things about that genre of redactions is that most of that material, or material of that kind, material that would harm an ongoing investigation, i.e., in this case, the actual Mueller investigations themselves, I guess we should refer to them in the plural now, were all the while being leaked to the target of the investigation, the White House, by both chairs, the Republican chairs of both the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. Devin Nunes, we knew about already. The surprise, I guess, yesterday was that Richard Burr, as I said, the worst Burr since Aaron, and he is related, as it turns out. Worst Burr since Aaron was leaking all this information quietly to the White House. I mean, he managed to do it in normal leaking fashion. Somehow, for whatever reason, Nunes was unable to simply talk to the White House and blurt the stuff out and not have it get in the newspaper. I don't know why he decided to take like an Uber sound truck and blare over the PA system. I'm going to obstruct justice. I'm on my way to the White House. Everyone look at me. And no one knows why he did that. Burr did it quietly, but meanwhile, I guess the big bombshell here was everybody had spent the last 2 years saying what an exemplary set of adults in the room the Senate Intelligence Committee was. And it turns out that the guy who was chairing the committee the whole time was as big a leaker as Nunes was. So, yeah, about that. In other words, he was leaking all of the sort of information that we still don't have in front of us because it's been redacted because it could hurt an ongoing investigation. That didn't stop them. And, of course, they're still as guilty as hell. And now we have Richard Burr's name to add to the fire. Anyway, let me get through this because otherwise we'll just have a repeat of yesterday's show. So, where were we? Yes, the release, it's an increase in the calls for Barr to release the report to Congress. If Barr refuses to do so, and he will and is already in the process of doing that, and House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler issues a subpoena, we may be in for a separation of powers showdown, and a central question will be the legal basis upon which Congress is entitled to see the fruits of Mueller's investigation. The argument for Congress obtaining Mueller's full report on obstruction is typically based on constitutional power to impeach, since Congress alone has the power to take action against the president if he has broken the law or abused his power. That, according to the DOJ's guidelines and what they've extracted from OLC memos along the way. The OLC memos, of course, being an invention of convenience at some point in the recent past, but somehow given the force of constitutional law. Anyway, so since Congress alone has the power to take action against the president, if he broke the law or abused his power, which is true if the Justice Department adheres to its policy of not indicting a sitting president, even if it's not settled law, Congress would by necessity need to see the evidence Mueller has gathered to determine if impeachment is warranted. Pick a small bone with that one. They can impeach him whether they see it or not, but okay. In order for hand-wringers to feel okay, they'll never feel good about it. In order to feel okay about doing it, they'll want to be able to point to the fact that they saw the evidence, even if they never share the evidence with us. If lawmakers weren't able to see the report, then the president would effectively be immunized from accountability for wrongdoing while he's in office, putting him above the law. This is a powerful argument in the battle that could ensue in the coming weeks, but it overlooks an additional constitutional basis that Congress has for reviewing the president's conduct. Congress has a responsibility rooted firmly in the Constitution to safeguard the integrity of the justice system, including to prevent obstruction of justice. Therefore, Mueller's findings are as much about whether President Donald Trump has stepped on Congress's toes as it is about whether he broke the law. The problem is one house of Congress, the Senate, because it is controlled by Republicans, does not appear to care about having its toes stepped on. And indeed, the majority leader of that House has willingly given over all congressional prerogative to the most corrupt president ever to serve. So, and his wife works for him. Thought I'd throw that in there too. Oh, and he's also now the beneficiary of the largesse of Russian oligarchs. That's weird, too. In contesting a subpoena from Congress, Russia continues here. Not Russia. The argument for... wait a minute, did I leave off the right place here? Here we are. In contesting a subpoena from Congress, the White House likely will make its favorite defense, which is that the president, legally speaking, can't obstruct justice. Are they sticking to that? I think so. I haven't really restated that one lately. But I guess she's right. They may very well do so in contesting subpoenas. This unitary executive theory, that's a jump. But okay, this unitary executive theory rests on Article 2 of the Constitution, which gives the chief executive the power to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. The jump I'm talking about here is really, this is, we get eventually to the unitary executive theory, but I don't think that's what this idea is, that a president can't obstruct justice is a theory about the inherent powers of the office and his ability to prevent the justice system from indicting him and holding him accountable under law is really is what we would attribute to the unitary executive theory. That is the idea that he could order or otherwise prevail upon federal prosecutors not to prosecute him, even if he were indicted, is because or is based on this unitary executive theory. That is, all actors in the executive branch are under the direct control of our unitary executive, the president. He embodies the entire executive branch, and other actors must execute his will in what they do, and that acting to the contrary of his will is an ultra virus. That is outside of the scope of their powers. They can't act independently of the president, which is also something to keep in mind when the president, this one perhaps, and others in the past have insisted that they've been investigated and exonerated by independent branches, independent actors inside of the executive branch, and at the same time, when convenient, claim to be a unitary executive as well. So it doesn't really work out very well. But it's one of those weird areas of gray in constitutional law that we can never seem to really figure out properly. Okay. Oh, it just occurs to me now I have, thankfully I remembered now, it's time for me to make sure that all of our alarms are set so that our brakes are properly timed. And, okay, well, that'll disrupt things for just a second here. All right, I think we're set. And moving on. So in contesting a subpoena from Congress, the White House likely will make this unitary executive style or inherent powers, actually, argument. So does that make the next sentence wrong? The unitary executive theory rests on Article 2 of the Constitution, which gives the chief executive the power to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. That is certainly a part of unitary executive theory. Doesn't necessarily follow from the previous sentence. But at any rate, she's not wrong here. It's just I think she makes some leaps in the explanation. According to this view, the language means the president alone is in charge of which cases to pursue in the justice system. Back on track here. If he decides to stop an investigation, that is his prerogative, and his reasons for doing so are beyond the purview of investigators, Congress, and the courts. A year before being confirmed as Attorney General, Barr laid out an ancillary proposition in a long and rambling memo. Who am I to criticize long and rambling? To Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who stood next to him yesterday. Oh, and we have some information on who the bearded guy is, too. Maybe we'll get to that. If not, tweet me. I'll send it to you. So he sent this long and rambling memo to Rosenstein arguing the president can't be investigated for obstruction, though it appears he was, based on something that is on its face a valid exercise of his power, like firing the FBI director. According to Barr, questioning the motives behind such an action would have disastrous consequences and open a Pandora's box of potential inquisitions into all exercises of prosecutorial discretion. But of course, I guess we can harken back to our administrative law discussions in the past. You are perhaps presumed to have this power so long as it's not exercised arbitrarily or capriciously. I don't know whether there's any settled law on whether or not that terminology applies to the exercises of prosecutorial discretion. But certainly, if you can actually demonstrate corrupt motive for the use of prosecutorial discretion, you would have the attention of the courts, at any rate, and probably be given an opening by most honest brokers to make your case. In other words, it wouldn't automatically be dismissed up front, which is the conclusion you'd have to reach if you were a believer in the unitary executive theory and had a conscience, which might not be the case. The problem with this defense, Asha continues, is that it conflates enforcement of the laws, a power that resides in the executive branch, with administration of justice, which is constitutionally the responsibility shared by all three branches, including Congress. When it comes to the administration of justice and those who would thwart the integrity of that process, Congress has a big role to play. The idea of obstruction of justice has its origins in an 1819 Supreme Court case, and all that old stuff is no good now anyway. It's past its expiration date, so throw it out, says Donald Trump. So, where does this idea come from? What is this 1819 Supreme Court case? It's McCulloch versus Maryland. If you went to law school, you know it. If you, as she says here parenthetically, if you saw Hamilton, you know it. Although she says if you're a Hamilton fan. I think if you saw Hamilton and hated it, you still probably remember McCulloch versus Maryland, that challenged Congress's power to create a national bank. The court found that Congress's authority to create a bank, even though not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, stemmed from its power to create laws necessary and proper for executing its explicit powers, like collecting taxes, borrowing money, and regulating commerce. By the way, a couple of things, all of which sort of lean toward the interpretation that maybe there ought to be a bank, although doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a federal bank. Importantly, the court noted that under the same reasoning, Congress could similarly pass laws which are necessary and proper to execute the powers of other branches as well. It's actually what they do all the time. As an example of the latter, the Supreme Court pointed out that Congress could pass laws to ensure the effective functioning of the courts, noting that crimes like falsifying a process of the court or perjury were conducive to the due administration of justice. In other words, the court made clear that Congress has the constitutional authority to ensure that the justice system can function without malevolent interference. This is exactly what obstruction of justice is about. As courts have observed in more recent cases, it makes sense that Congress would be entrusted with safeguarding the integrity of the judicial process. After all, Congress itself is responsible for creating all federal courts, apart from the Supreme Court. What does it mean? It means that in the Constitution it says there shall be a Supreme Court, so that's not their ball game. They can't abolish it. But beyond that, they are empowered to create all the rest of the courts. We have the circuit courts of appeal, the number of them that we have, where they are, what gets covered, what their jurisdiction is, because Congress said this is what we're going to have in order that the Supreme Court not be the final arbiter or the original arbiter, really, of everything. They created the rest of the federal courts. They can recreate it. They can abolish the districts. They can go with some other thing and say this court that sits in San Francisco will hear all cases from A to F, and from G to J is going to be handled by Denver. I mean, they can come up with any process they want. It's not carved in stone. So Congress is itself responsible for creating all the federal courts. Protecting the procedure through which cases are investigated, tried, and adjudicated is what allows the judicial branch to function as a co-equal branch. If defendants could derail cases, mislead investigators, or lie to the court with impunity, courts would cease to have the ability to administer justice at all. This is why process crimes, the family of crimes that includes not only the obstruction of justice, but also false statements, perjury, witness tampering, contempt of court, which you all know what it is, but it's noted here. It's a mechanism by which the judiciary can assert its own interest in fair administration of the laws. It's important to have that definition because when we talk about later inherent contempt of Congress, why should they have that power? Well, Congress too needs a mechanism by which they can assert its own interests, their own interests in fair administration of oversight. But at any rate, all of these things are indispensable to the rule of law. They ensure that the integrity of the justice system is maintained from start to finish. If it's Congress's job to create rules that protect the court's ability to do their job, then it's also Congress's duty to get to the bottom of whether the president has tried to thwart those efforts. I guess another good thing to note along the way here is like when we've been discussing things like federal rules of criminal procedure, et cetera, those things too are though they're guided by precedents and decisions and input from the judicial branch, those are legislative creations as well. What courts will sit, where will they sit, what will their jurisdiction be, and by what rules will they function? All functions for Congress to decide, in case you still have doubt about whether or not they should be involved in this. In short, yeah, right. Sorry, Asha, you were very short about it. I wasn't. While the president can decide what cases to pursue, it's Congress's job to protect how they move through our judicial system. In fact, understanding obstruction of justice as an expression of Congress's constitutional power to safeguard the judicial process means that, contrary to Barr's assertions, the motive behind the obstruction matters, particularly when it comes to the president, precisely because the test for obstruction of justice is whether someone acted with a corrupt motive. The crime gets to the heart of whether Trump has upheld his oath to ensure faithful execution of the laws. Not that he's been faithful to anything else or any other oaths. And gives the take care clause meaning and accountability. Time now for our music. If there is evidence, for example, that Trump tried to stop the Russia investigation to shield his own private conduct because it is illegal, politically damaging, or even merely embarrassing to him personally, then he has not only violated the U.S. legal code, but also his own constitutional duty to enforce the laws in good faith. We'll conclude this piece and then move on to more contemporaneous commentary via Twitter after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. Except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let me give you the concluding paragraph here and then move on from there. It goes this way. It's because the president holds such immense power. Oh, let me make sure everything is muted here as we continue. Oh, we've got a lot of muting to do. It's because the president holds such immense power that the obstruction of justice law not only applies to him, but applies especially to him. When he abuses that authority, he is not only potentially breaking the law, he is encroaching on Congress's constitutional interest in the administration of justice, which means Congress has a lens, independent of its impeachment power, through which to review his actions. The full details of Mueller's report will reveal if Trump used his power to undermine the efforts of the co-equal branches to uphold the rule of law, and Congress has every right to find out. All right, we've reached the conclusion, and it's a hair-splitting sort of look at things, but it's going to require this as, both good faith and not so good faith arguments are made by the president and his defenders as to why either he isn't guilty of anything at all, or shouldn't be impeached, or impeachment is an apposite, or cannot be indicted, or can't be indicted after he's removed from office one way or another, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things are going to have to be dealt with, and you know how it is in the Democratic Party. You're going to have hand-wringers all along the way who are going to want to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, even though that's of zero concern to the other side. I guess people are clinging to the old ways, the old gods, I suppose, in looking for reassurance that they're doing the right thing. And I guess they can't be entirely faulted for that. Okay, Armando had some complaint about the resting on the take care clause argument, although I think what she's doing here, I don't think that she's saying, well, the grounds for impeachment here is the take care clause and his violation of it, though, I mean, I suppose that would work just fine. And instead he says, well, you should be looking just directly at the crimes here. Obstruction of justice, emoluments clause, campaign finance crimes, all true, and all charges for which he should face impeachment alongside many others. But I think what she's just trying to do here in this article is use the take care clause to demonstrate why, even short of impeachment, Congress has a constitutional right to see the full Mueller report and consider it, whether in the context of impeachment or not. It's an interesting side argument that you might want to have if, for instance, you come to the conclusion, as some conservative commentators have erroneously, that Congress is not entitled to the grand jury information, let's say, redacted by Barr under, well, the aforementioned federal rules, 6E in particular. I mean, I think that argument has largely been countered very well, that there's plenty in Rule 6E that still gives them the opportunity to review that information. But just to satisfy all the hand-wringers, well, Rule 6E is being read in the D.C. Circuit as not including an inherent power, not recognizing an inherent power in Congress to, or rather an inherent power in the courts to release grand jury information to Congress for just anything, but rather that it would need to be, the excuse would have to be that it was a necessary prerequisite to, or be a necessary part of an ongoing impeachment proceeding, a judicial proceeding. You remember when that language was used, and that an impeachment inquiry in Congress would count as a judicial proceeding, and so therefore if there were an inquiry into impeachment underway, the court would not need to rely on its inherent powers to decide to release that information, and could release it pursuant to a necessity in a judicial proceeding. Of course, you'll perhaps recall from our expansive discussion on it that one of the three judges on the D.C. Circuit panel disagreed and said, no, there very certainly is an inherent power in the courts to do this. He did not prevail, but if there's an en banc rehearing of the case in the D.C. Circuit, they might grab that power back to themselves. And apparently there's a split in the circuits as to whether or not there is such a power. And so the Supreme Court might want to weigh in, but 5 of those nuts might just do away with their own inherent powers, which seems extraordinarily foolish. And I wonder whether they would think it lays the groundwork for curtailing invocation of inherent powers across all the branches. Why would they choose only to shoot the judicial branch in the foot? Though I suppose they could decide, weirdos that they are, well, that's the only inherent power we have the power to curtail. Everyone else, it's up to you to curtail your own inherent powers. And if you choose not to do it, well, then too bad for us. I don't know why they would agree to that, but they might. For partisan reasons, for immediate partisan gain is the answer to why they would agree to something like that. But it may be the case that the full D.C. Circuit disagrees, and the 2 judges who said there's no inherent power to release 6E information in the courts is wrong. Who knows? But if you didn't think that that was the case, and you thought inherent power didn't exist in that situation, then fine, don't worry about it. Judicial proceedings will provide an answer for that. And if you, for some reason, don't think that that will work because there isn't an impeachment inquiry underway. There were the arguments that it would be perfectly within the bounds of Rule 6E to release it to Congress in anticipation of an impeachment inquiry, or for Congress to be able to adequately decide whether or not an impeachment inquiry is necessary. That could very well be the case too. So there's that next level down. And if you don't believe in all of that, and you don't, for whatever reason, you are willing to say that the Congress has no entitlement whatsoever to the grand jury material, there's still the argument that Asha is making here, and say, all right, well, we're not going to release the information to them based on the federal rules of criminal procedure, but instead under the take care clause, or under the inherent powers of the Congress imbued by the Constitution for the to oversee the administration of justice in the country. If that's too broad for you, or if that's not broad enough for you, I guess you could always just go with, well, impeachment is what the House of Representatives says it is. That doctrine having been enunciated by Gerald Ford, of all people. I hope I have that attribution right. It seems dumb enough to have possibly been him. Anyway, moving on from this to yesterday's commentary, as promised. I think that will bring us up to speed on things, although commentary continues. Here's what I found, apparently, according to my own records, most intriguing about yesterday's discussion. Let's see. I'll just have to work backwards here. And in no particular order other than the order I bookmarked them chronologically. Igor Bobich was, I guess, first among this to say, quoting the Mueller report, the president's efforts to influence the investigation were mostly unsuccessful, but that is largely because the persons who surrounded the president declined to carry out orders or accede to his requests. This one caught a lot of eyes. And there's a subcategory here of people too dumb to collude, which apparently is where Don Trump Jr. was classified. Essentially, it seems one of the conclusions of the report, or if you don't credit them with having reached any conclusions, the inevitable conclusion you'll reach from reading the report, apparently, is that, and many people do disagree with this, I think this is being generous for some as yet unexplained, probably political reason. Don Jr. is let off the hook for the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Natalia Veselnitskaya and others. We've talked about it extensively. Because he was a political neophyte and never had any opportunity to learn that the activities in which he was engaged were illegal. Now, most of you were probably raised on the admonition that ignorance is no excuse when it comes to criminal law, and that is true, unless you are the president's son, I guess. I think that's honestly what's really going on here, is that I wonder whether they're just trying to keep the focus on Trump, and I mean, I don't think you're going to keep him under any control in any event. But I guess along the way, he's threatened that, one of his many red lines is, whatever that's supposed to mean, is going after his kids. And I wonder whether it's just not worth a whole lot to the country to put Don Jr. in jail for some amount of time over this. Although that feels disturbingly like the comments made earlier in the year by Speaker Pelosi, with which I disagree, that the impeachment, he's just not worth it. I mean, if you do the crime, fine. I'm sorry, I can't help you. Jail is what awaits ordinarily. But he is rich and white. So there is that. It's at least consistent with our prior law enforcement efforts. Just we disagree with the way they've been, that's all been exercised along the way. But I guess the idea is supposed to be that he had no opportunity somehow ever, because he's both an idiot and a political neophyte, to learn that the things he was doing were obviously campaign finance violations, espionage law violations, what have you. No word yet as to why, having taken that meeting alongside one of the most, I guess for lack of a better word, sophisticated, though he was just a criminal all along, it turns out, sophisticated political operators in the world, Paul Manafort, why that doesn't mitigate things. Why doesn't the fact that you're there with your top political advisors impute knowledge to you? How come Mueller, or how come Manafort isn't responsible for turning to Don Jr. before, during, or after this meeting and saying, this is a terrible idea, we cannot become involved in this, and here's why. I know you might not know this, but I also thought it was kind of interesting that there's now this built-in excuse of for every time somebody tells you we need a political outsider to come in and straighten things out. One of the dangers, I guess, apparently, of bringing in political outsiders is they won't know what the hell they're doing, and that might end up being a defense to criminal charges against them if they were inherently corrupt to begin with. You're never going to be able to nail them on anything because they can always say, I didn't know that espionage was bad. So I'm not really sure what to make of this. The other part of this, and I think the thing that Igor was more interested in here, is the idea that Don McGahn and to some extent Jeff Sessions and a number of other aides apparently made a habit of ignoring the president's demands for activities that would otherwise be explicitly obstruction of justice or any number of other process crimes. They were basically being asked a number of times, and we read Frank Ruta's tweet thread about it the other day, how many times the president has demanded his aides and staff violate the law at his request in order to satisfy his demand that that his own crimes be covered up, or that politically disadvantageous problems be disposed of, or really, in many cases, just, I need someone to execute my why don't you just isms in, my policy, why don't you just isms, why don't you just close the border, why don't you just arrest all asylum seekers, etc. Well, all these things would be illegal. And many times people were in the habit, and they're still in the habit, according to reporters who cover the White House, of ignoring those demands. And it turns out that part of Mueller's non-conclusory conclusions is that the president, in some cases, very narrowly avoided open and shut cases of obstruction of justice simply because his would-be co-conspirators, the people he hired to be his co-conspirators, refused at some level to execute their role in the conspiracy. And I guess he's convinced that there's no such thing as attempted obstruction of justice, although I don't know why there isn't. Somebody said that there wasn't, and I don't know that that's really the case. But maybe there should be. And actually, this led to another discussion. Some conservative commentators were saying, well, yes, the reason Congress has a role in reviewing all of Mueller's information and acting on it, their job in all this is not necessarily to impeach, but rather to make new laws that will declare some of these gray areas illegal or not once and for all. And since there's no, passing such a law would be ex post facto to Trump's having executed these or broken these norms, you couldn't prosecute him on it. But next president, you would be able to. Although, quite honestly, the idea that Donald Trump wouldn't violate them in the balance of the term that's left to him is quite an assumption, and a wrong one at that. But interesting to watch some commentators now insisting that, for instance, Jeff Sessions and Don McGahn, with the qualifier, unsatisfying qualifier, that politics aside, these two are somehow now American heroes for having refused to go along with this. Very difficult to swallow. The argument that I saw being made here was, the fact that you disagree with all the other stupid things that they did as political judgment. But in the cases where they refused the president's orders, they are acting heroically. I will leave that open for the rest of you to consider, although I will just say I have difficulty imagining them as heroic at all. But people are different in different situations. I think they're the villains in certain situations. I think they made the right decisions here, but I don't know if I attribute it to heroism or self-preservation, although very frequently people will tell it, sometimes actual honest-to-God heroes of the Medal of Honor stripe will tell you it felt a lot like self-preservation there too, quite honestly. But outside judgment of others is that, self-preservation would have led you to run away rather than help others. And the Medal of Honor is really, of course, about saving others above and beyond your duty to yourself. But okay, that's another discussion for another day. But whether or not their refusal to execute these illegal orders is heroic, I guess it brings us to another point, which is while we're lauding them for this, or while some are lauding them for this, I think you should keep in mind what sort of orders are, what sort of presidential orders, given the immense power that we are said to believe the Constitution grants the person of the president, what kind of orders, presidential orders, do you think get disobeyed this frequently or at all, really? I mean, given what most people think the president's powers are, disobeying orders would be either you're a very forgetful person and should be fired, or more likely, the problem is that the orders were illegal to begin with. Those are the kinds of presidential orders people ignore. Although I think there's a broader category now for this president, and I think it's unique, which is sometimes he orders things that are not illegal but are stupid, and I ignore them because I know that this president is dumb and forgetful. And if I don't do it, simply because it'll either be hard, annoying, or foolish to execute these orders, I won't do it because he'll forget. But in all other instances, with all other presidencies, most orders are pretty well thought through. They make mistakes from time to time, but people don't typically simply say to themselves, I'm not going to execute this order on purpose because something. Because he doesn't have the authority, or it's a terrible idea to begin with. Terrible idea or no, we give a lot of deference to the president. The whole system does, and you'd find yourself in pretty serious trouble. Ordinarily, the chief of staff of the White House would bounce you out of there pretty quickly for making political decisions on your own about whether or not to execute the president's actual policy orders. The ones that are ignored are the illegal ones, and so you should take note of the fact that there's more than one person and more than one instance in which the orders were ignored means there were a hell of a lot of illegal orders being issued by this president. Next one up, what did I grab here? Matt Separa, government auditor, and formerly from Michigan, now here in D.C. Let's see, this sort of reading his bio here to figure out who he is. Matt Separa grabs this, in which the press secretary, this was the big one, yes, Sarah Sanders, tells the special counsel she was just lying from the podium. Everyone's been on this one, and rightly so. This clip here from the Mueller report, Clinton investigation, or the Barr version of it, Clinton investigation, this is the continuation of a previous and unrelated sentence. The president's draft termination letter, that is the draft termination of the letter of termination for James Comey as director of the FBI, also stated that morale in the FBI was at an all-time low. Do you remember this? And Sanders told the press after Comey's termination that the White House has heard from, quote, countless FBI agents who had lost confidence in Comey. But the evidence does not support those claims. That's problem number one. You lied. The problem complicates itself a little bit further here. The president told Comey at their January 27th dinner that the people of the FBI really like him. which is, of course, evidence to the contrary of what they claimed. No evidence suggests that the president heard otherwise before deciding to terminate Comey, and Sanders acknowledged to investigators that her comments were not founded on anything. Now, she's back on television this morning, which is amazing in its own right. You have doubtless seen the clip circulated. It's 2 minutes long, and so I'm not going to play it all the way through. But ABC News tweeting it this way: pressed repeatedly on her comments on FBI agents, Sarah Sanders tells George Stephanopoulos, quote, "It was the heat of the moment," meaning that it wasn't a scripted talking point. "I'm sorry that I wasn't a robot like the Democrat Party was about the Mueller probe." And I think they actually corrected her statement to read Democratic Party, if I saw Greg's comments correctly. So she got a dig in there calling it the Democrat Party, once again, on top of her excuse for lying to the press. I think the press is really annoyed by this one. You know how they get, they take umbrage at stuff like this. By the way, what this means is the only complete exoneration that I have seen in the Mueller report, despite Trump's claims that he's completely exonerated, is for Michelle Wolf, who was upbraided and ostracized by polite society for telling us outright that Sarah Sanders is a pathological liar. We knew this to be the case, but she said it, and somehow the press took umbrage with that. Now they know that they were being lied to. I wonder whether there's apologies forthcoming for Michelle Wolf. Probably not, because they still insist that, oh, well, she was making fun of Sarah Sanders' looks, which she wasn't, but because it involved, I don't know, the joke went to makeup, I guess that's looks. So therefore, something. And I guess the same logic that tells people that Nazis were leftists because National Socialism, well, makeup. And makeup is looks, and therefore you were making fun of her looks. But anyway, yeah, smoky-eyed jokes are the real tragedy here, not the fact that Sarah Sanders, one, makes up a complete lie. And what a bold and audacious lie it was, too. We fired the FBI director because nobody in the FBI likes him. Oh, in fact, the president, even the president says everybody in the FBI likes him. What about that? Well, fine, but something. At least I'm not a robot. At least it's like the old joke. You have two robots and two doors. One always tells the truth and one always lies. And which one do you hire to be your press secretary is the question. Forget about which door to take. Which one should be your press secretary? The one that always lies? Well, at least I'm not a robot. Okay, well, but we could have got a better robot than this one. So anyway, I thought that was a big deal too, and everybody made much of that, and they should have. Greg Sargent's commentary that I grabbed. This is all disjointed, but I think, a good review of what went on, and just an indication of how much is in this report. What did he grab? The president then called Rosenstein directly and said, ellipses, he wanted Rosenstein to do a press conference. Rosenstein responded that this was not a good idea because if the press asked him, he would tell the truth that Comey's firing was not his idea. Here, of course, the idea being that the president asked Rosenstein to cover for him by telling people that it was out of his hands. Rosenstein himself had said Comey should be fired. It was his idea to begin with, and I'm not to blame here. Well, that didn't work out very well either. This traces back to an earlier tweet from Greg here. Mueller report documents that White House flatly lied to cover up the fact that Trump made the decision to fire Comey, even though, I don't know, he told Lester Holt about it. The first screen cap here is where Trump makes the decision. The second screen cap that Greg includes is where Trump tries to get Rosenstein to say it was his decision, but he refuses. But the White House spokespeople go ahead and say it anyway. I'll read you those clips here. First, the weekend following Comey's May 3rd, 2017 testimony, the president traveled to his resort in Bedminster, New Jersey. And by the way, he's on the way to Mar-a-Lago today, I think. At a dinner on Friday, May 5th, attended by the president and various advisors and family members, including Jared Kushner and senior advisor Stephen Miller, the Nazi, the president stated that he wanted to remove Comey and had ideas for a letter that would be used to make the announcement. The president dictated arguments and specific language for the letter And Miller took notes. By the way, Trump tweeting this morning to beware of people who take notes. I'm going to have to grab that and tweet that one alongside Miller taking notes. As reflected in the notes, the president told Miller that the letter should start, "While I greatly appreciate you informing me that I am not under investigation concerning what I have often stated as a fabricated story on a Trump-Russia relationship pertaining to the 2016 presidential election, please be informed that I, and I believe the American public, including D's and R's," that's the notes, I guess, "have lost faith in you as director of the FBI." Following the dinner, Miller prepared a termination letter. Miller prepared it. Based on those notes and research he conducted to support the president's arguments. He's not very good at it. Over the weekend, the president provided several rounds of blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's the point of his decision. Following that is this clip. It says, that night, the White House press office called the Department of Justice and said the White House wanted to put out a statement saying it was Rosenstein's idea to fire Comey. Rosenstein, I keep forgetting what we decided on. I had it for a while, like months. I was fine. Rosenstein told other DOJ officials that he would not participate in putting out a false story. All right, good. Hero? Man, I don't know. The president then called Rosenstein directly and said he was watching Fox News, surprise, surprise, that the coverage had been great, and then he wanted Rosenstein to do a press conference. In other words, like, I want just one more episode of this show. I'm binge watching, but I've caught up now. But I want one more episode. Go do a press conference so I can watch that. Rosenstein responded this was not a good idea because if the press asked him, he would tell the truth and say that Comey's firing was not his idea. Sessions also informed the White House counsel's office that evening that Rosenstein was upset that his memorandum was being portrayed as the reason for Comey's termination. It was so portrayed, was it not? Very interesting, the fact that they decided to go ahead and do that and lie on top of the lie that they put together, that they didn't formulate the idea themselves, and then, by the way, just compounding the error. Sarah Sanders out there saying, well, the whole thing was because everybody in the FBI hates Comey. Oops. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just 1 minute break there, so not enough time to actually prepare the tweet that I want so badly to go out. Somebody come in here and do this thing. I'll take care of it after the show. This, though, the Donald Trump tweet from this morning that came to mind. Statements are made about me by certain people in the crazy Mueller report in itself, written by 18 angry Democrat Trump haters, not hard to find, which are fabricated and totally untrue, but which vindicate me nonetheless. Watch out for people who take so-called notes when the notes never existed until needed, because I never something, and I guess 45 minutes later he finally concludes that tweet. I don't even remember what it says. Not that it really matters, but yeah, watch out for people who take notes. Like the Nazi, you had take notes in your meeting. Also, I guess I was interested in how many of these meetings take place, once again, over meals. I know I'm not supposed to make fun, but the president does nothing but eat all day long, and all business is conducted over meals. And by the way, one of the least believable claims, and he backs off of it very early on in the Mueller investigation, but one of the least believable claims in the whole thing is that Comey asked to meet him over dinner because he wanted to plead to stay on. But in fact, Trump was, getting ready to fire him, but he wouldn't have dinner with him to ask him whether or not he was under investigation. But he tried to cover his tracks by saying Comey asked for the dinner. If you tell me that Donald Trump and any other person in existence are in the same room and one and only one of the two of them requested a dinner, you're never going to get me to bet against Donald Trump on that. Quite honestly, I doubt very much, whether Comey, as director of the FBI, you don't request meetings with the president all that often, although I think at some point he did possibly think about requesting, maybe even had admitted that he requested a meeting when he said, there's this dossier that people are talking about, and I think I owe you an explanation of it. But, Comey inviting himself to dinner? No, he's not going to do that. If he's going to meet with the president, it's going to be business and business only. Now, if the president suggests dinner at the time, he's not going to say no. He'll sit there politely, and I'm sure he might even eat. But no, James Comey or really any other director of the FBI that I know of doesn't say invite himself over to dinner at the White House or anywhere if he has to meet with the president in some official capacity. We're not going to make a dinner out of it. All right, let's see. Other things that I grabbed along the way. What's this one? Let's take a look. I'm relearning the Mueller report this way. Let's see. I've got a tweet from Julia Ainsley. Julia is national security and justice reporter for NBC News. Tweeting, unlike Barr, Mueller says Congress has the right to review evidence on obstruction. So what do you know? Is that, of course, the general theme that Armando covered very well yesterday, that it turned out within minutes that it's a very strange strategy that Barr followed here. But it became abundantly clear before the show was over, really, that he was lying his ass off. And then, of course, the proof came with the release of this redacted Barr version of the Mueller report. Even with all those redactions, Barr couldn't change people's conclusions that he had been lying wildly in his press conference just an hour and a half earlier. It's a very weird strategy, and everybody's sort of puzzling over it. But I guess, I don't know. I'm not certain whether we'll ever find out exactly what good comes of it to Barr for having had such a dopey press conference. But, they don't pay the attorney general all that much money. Maybe it's something else. I don't know. Maybe it's just plain partisanship. But anyway, more important is this grab here from page 382, apparently, that lets us know, no, Barr wasn't telling the truth when he said that Congress doesn't really have the right to review this evidence on obstruction anyway. And maybe, I don't know whether he said in his press conference that Mueller agreed, but in any case, Mueller does not. Saying, under the Office of Legal Counsel's analysis, Congress can permissibly criminalize certain obstructive conduct by the president, such as suborning perjury, intimidating witnesses, or fabricating evidence, because those prohibitions raise no separation of powers questions. The Constitution does not authorize the president to engage in such conduct, and those actions would transgress the president's duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. That harkens back to Asha Rangapa's piece earlier, I guess. So she finds some corroboration there in Mueller's report. Again, there's some room for discussion, and I've seen some conservative commentators again saying, and I guess they're supposed to be lining this up alongside the 6E prohibitions and saying, well, even if you conclude that Congress could have access to grand jury materials in furtherance of an impeachment proceeding, there's nothing in here that necessarily warrants impeachment in the first place, but rather Congress's interest in seeing any of this information is pursuant to their right to legislate that obstruction of justice and suborning perjury and intimidating witnesses, and I guess new inventions in the field that aren't yet explicitly illegal be made illegal. In other words, that they have a legislative interest in it, not a quasi-judicial interest in it. I don't think it makes a very big difference, and since there's no disputing the fact that they have the quasi-judicial power to remove the president from office, I don't know why you even bother drawing the distinction, but people love drawing distinctions. That's what the law is all about. Okay, so that of some interest as well. Armando, can you talk about the impeachment thing? Certainly. Go ahead, chime in. I'm going to move on to the next couple of tweets. We'll discuss any and all of them. Steve Riley is up next in my chronology, investigative reporter at USA Today. His selection here. The special counsel's office made 14 referrals of evidence of potentially criminal activity to outside offices. This is a critically important point. Only 2 are publicly known at this point, and he includes screen caps here of, I guess, 12 of the 14 referrals being almost, pretty much, partially or completely redacted. So again, the special counsel's office made 14 referrals of evidence of potential criminal activity to other prosecutorial offices. Number 1, alphabetically by subject. They are summarized below. The first is completely redacted. The name of the person involved and the nature of the referral. Number 2 is Michael Cohen, which I assume we're going by alphabetically by last name. So somebody who comes alphabetically before Cohen is in trouble. Look that up. Let's speculate on who that might be. Michael Cohen, during the course of the investigation, well, you know about the Michael Cohen case. I shouldn't bother reading you that. That was referred to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and the New York FBI field office, which should probably be cleaned out at some point in the near future. And when it is in the next Democratic administration, they will be accused of politicizing the FBI. Just putting that out there for you. Number 3, coming after Cohen, but before Craig, who's only partially redacted down here. Somewhere between CO and CR, there are 2 referrals, both completely redacted. Number 5 here, Gregory Craig, a redaction, and then Skadden Arps, Slate, Meagher, and Flom, LLP. During the course of the FARA investigation of Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, the special counsel's office uncovered evidence of potential FARA violations pertaining to redacted, and also Gregory Craig, Skadden Arps, Slate, Meagher, and Flom, LLP, or Skadden as they call it, and their work on behalf of the government of Ukraine. After consultation with the NSD, the evidence regarding Craig and redaction was referred to NSD, and NSD elected to partner with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York and the FBI's New York field offices, NSD, and I'm not even sure what I'm talking about, NSD. Later elected to partner on the Craig matter with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. NSD retained and handled issues relating to Skadden itself. Number 6 on the list is also completely redacted, as are numbers 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And 14. So that's that. I guess they're all pretty much, every one of them is 12 of them are completely redacted. One of them is partially redacted, and the other one is Michael Cohen. So I think that's pretty interesting all by itself. And I guess a reminder that Greg Craig, not a Trump world figure, so I guess that makes our task that much harder. Good redacting there. You're going to leave us confused. It's possible that the people who fall alphabetically between Cohen and Craig are, certainly Donald Trump would encourage you to believe that they are, in fact, Democrats. And somehow if Clinton could come in between Cohen and Craig, that would be great. The alphabet be damned. All right, let's see. Next up, Josh Campbell on Twitter. Let's see. What have we got here? Oh, we got a view. Doesn't go straight through to the tweet, huh? Josh Campbell with CNN, a former FBI special agent as well, points out that although we've heard the no collusion conclusion, this from the Mueller report on page 62 is damning. Oh, it's a damning thing, eh? Mike Flynn contacted associates, he is a spy after all, who were already trying to find Clinton's emails. Their plan included contacting foreign intelligence services to see if anyone had hacked Hillary Rodham Clinton's server, HRC's server. An important point, not yet brought up on today's show. I'll read you the clip for two purposes. One, again, to reiterate what's happening here is that people associated with the Trump campaign, so desperate to get their hands on Clinton's emails, that they actually formulated a plan to, let's talk to essentially enemy intelligence services. Enemy, it's important to define, I guess, if you're going to try him for treason at any point. And I guess there's reason to believe that you would have a hard time definitively proving some of these as enemies, but the others, most people would concede. Anyway, the idea was they were going to talk to hostile foreign intelligence agencies in order to get these things. And if they didn't have them already, well, that's what Trump was doing, going on television and asking Russia to hack those servers. And all of a sudden, they did get attacked. According to the Mueller report, that was very interesting, too, that, it followed very closely on his instructions to the Russians to get those emails. The attacks began. Second reason I want to read it is because of the name that leads things off here in the clip that Josh Campbell includes. Ledeen began her efforts to obtain the Clinton emails before Flynn's request. As early as December of 2015. So we'll pause here for a second and say, Ledeen, who's that? The answer is, in this case, Barbara Ledeen, not Michael Ledeen. They're married. That's a married couple. Michael Ledeen could certainly, you could suspect would be already involved in such an effort, but I don't really know whether he was or it was completely Barbara's initiative. But Barbara Ledeen is somebody I've read to you about on the show before. During the elections, I'm sure, because Barbara Ledeen is, among other things, very good close friends with Barbara Comstock, who thankfully we bounced from Congress. We wouldn't need her around for some garbage like this. Much better to have a Democrat in her seat under any circumstances, and certainly now. But Barbara Ledeen and Barbara Comstock, good friends. Michael Ledeen, a complete loon, and I guess his wife pretty much the same. And in addition, in reading all of this, I know it's mentioned elsewhere in the report, and we mentioned it when we talked about Ledeen. Ledeen works for Chuck Grassley. She's a Senate staffer and still a current Senate staffer, and was a Senate staffer when she was doing all this. Here's what she was doing. Ledeen began her efforts to obtain the Clinton emails before Flynn's request as early as December of 2015. On December 3rd, 2015, she emailed Smith, Peter Smith, remember billionaire financier who underwrote the effort to try and find and hack out the emails. We read that story, too, from the hacker who was hired to try and help with that. You remember that story? She emailed Smith a proposal to obtain the emails stating, "Here is a proposal," which is a good thing to say when you're attaching a proposal. "Here is the proposal I briefly mentioned to you. The person I described to you would be happy to talk to you either in person or over the phone." I don't know whether that's the hacker who wrote the expose, but sounds like it. "The person can get the emails which, one, were classified," which is a bad thing to try and be hacking, "and two, were purloined by our enemies." And I guess she now thinks it's free to purloin them ourselves now, because they're already in the hands of the enemy, so we won't be doing their intelligence work for them. We'll just be consumers of their intelligence work. "That would demonstrate what needs to be demonstrated," she says. Attached to the email was a 25-page proposal stating that the Clinton email server was, in all likelihood, breached long ago. Of course, it hadn't been, as it turns out. Fake news there, lady. And that the Chinese, Russian, and Iranian intelligence services could, quote, reassemble the server's email content. The proposal called for a 3-phase approach. The first 2 phases consisted of open source analysis. The third phase consisted of checking with certain intelligence sources, quote, that have access through liaison work with various foreign services, unquote, to determine if any of those services had gotten to the server. The proposal noted, even if a single email was recovered and the provenance, of that email, it's provenance, was a foreign service, it would be catastrophic to the Clinton campaign. So, Barbara Ledeen, Senate staffer, working for Chuck Grassley, active in trying to not only root out those emails by hook or by crook, but recruiting Russian, Chinese, and Iranian intelligence operatives into the operation. Okay, that's not problematic at all. By the way, since we're treading onto this territory, hearkening back to Sarah Sanders and her incredible lie and her incredible story about her incredible lie this morning on ABC News. Does everybody remember just a few days ago when this chronic pathological liar who now says, well, at least I wasn't a robot. This is her excuse for the lie of hundreds. We were contacted by dozens of FBI agents. I don't know if she said dozens or hundreds or who knows. But countless. That was it. Countless. Could be any number of FBI agents. They totally contacted me. And I remember, by the way, there were reporters asking, do you have any of these? Can you even give us a redacted version of one of the contacts? What did they call you? There were calls, there were emails. She doubled down on this lie a couple of times. She was asked to clarify and made up, fabricated new stories about, how much evidence she had of this being the case. But no, she wasn't going to share any of them. People ask, can you send us a redacted email, a voicemail, anything, just to establish that even one FBI agent called and did what you said? No, I can't. I won't tell you. But on top of all this inveterate liar was the same one who told us just a couple of days ago that Trump's critics were all traitors and deserved the death penalty. There's all, so remember, treason is punishable by death in this country. Yeah, I remember her words, and I remember that people tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. No, she's talking about how absurd it is to accuse Trump of treason. And then, no, Jeanine Pirro and the president himself clarified that comment a few days later by saying, no, really, all the people who accuse me of all this wrongdoing are traitors, and that's a capital crime, and then blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, they were very clear about it. And clearly the treason and punishable by death in this country bit was a talking point that had been typed up at some point and circulated among people. I will throw out the possibility that it was originally meant to be delivered in the way that Sarah Sanders insisted she delivered it, that it was really supposed to be about how absurd this was to accuse the president of treason. And remember, how absurd is it? This is so absurd that this is a crime that's punishable by death, as she says it, in this country. And so, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for accusing the president of something so serious. And she may have read it correctly, the way it was designed to be written. That's, feels like a Stephen Miller memo, and she executed it correctly. What's hilarious is Jeanine Pirro screwed it up and read it like the rabid dog that she is. She went too far with it. She misunderstood the nuance of it. And I don't know whether the president ever bothered reading the memo. Probably not. He's then saw it on Jeanine Pirro, I'm sure, and just repeated it because he's an idiot like she is. The two biggest morons to lay their hands on this talking point were the president and his, one of his TV puppeteers. And they blew it and revealed the reality behind it. So there you have. I just wanted to mention that this is the woman on the TV today saying, "Well, at least I'm not a robot, and you all got it wrong." You were telling people that they should be executed for reading the Mueller report aloud. We didn't have it in our hands yet, but I mean, I guess the biggest story / non-story of the whole thing is we knew it all along, and now Mueller is just telling us what we knew, which is also problematic. To transition over to Armando, who's waiting patiently on the phone, and it's your interest in discussing the impeachment question.
I think it's interesting, of course, but I mean, Sarah Sanders might have been the one who had the slip of the tongue, right?
Yes, right. Well, she's the one.
I mean, maybe she's the one that misread the memo.
That could be. I mean, right? That's true. It could have been. I mean, if Miller did write it, the memo could have been, yes, we should execute all Americans who don't like the president. Sure, that might be his memo.
I mean, they're building detention camps,
right,
and holding people indefinitely who seek asylum.
But I guess on the question of impeachment, what struck me again, I guess I should also report. I don't know what Pelosi, if she's said anything this morning, but of course everybody's still fuming about.
They sort of walked back. They're now all, even Steny Hoyer issued a tweet.
Steny Hoyer said the wrong thing last night, and then a series of tweets from Sam Stein saying no one knows why he's out front saying no to impeachment, and then he said, "I'm all alone here. I meant the opposite."
He said all options are on the table, or
yes.
Such
so good. That's a key word on the table with Pelosi and impeachment.
Again, I don't think anybody has to be for impeachment necessarily right now, but what you can't do is foreclose impeachment.
Yeah, no one wants to hear he's not worth it kind of as an excuse. Like, you know what? That's not
what are you
value
doing? You
judgment.
might as well go home and just start campaigning because, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, or in fact, why don't you just go home and not campaign because there's nothing you can do in Congress? Why don't you just come back and ask to be in the Politburo?
But you mentioned the Rule 6 issue, and of course,
if
they're smart, the one thing that they need to realize on the Rule 6 issue is this recent D.C. Circuit ruling,
Yes.
which basically said judges can't expand but on their discretion beyond what's in the statute as the exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Except, we're not overturning the Sirica ruling from back in the day when the report was sent to Congress and made public.
Well, that would be pointless anyway. But
under Rule 6, but you got to have at least, I think, an argument that it's at least a preliminary proceeding to a judicial proceeding, which includes impeachment. And
yes. Though
if you say, I'm not doing that, then, what proceeding are you actually in preliminary? So you can't shut it down as a legal matter.
Right.
It's bad for your legal case to get the grand jury material.
Yes, that is true. Under the current state of things.
Maybe an en banc D.C. Circuit will reverse that, but who knows? And when?
Right. What's the point of why would you step in that trap? Right. Just say, right, we might actually need that. Before I thought, no, but, why not treat the Mueller report as a bombshell, even though we did know all those things.
I know you're saying it's not. Let me tell you why.
I mean, it's not that it isn't. Yeah, I mean,
but I think what you're saying is we knew it all, and I think that's true.
We knew a lot. We learned a lot yesterday, too. There was a lot of new stuff.
It just is different when there's an official imprimatur, especially for St. Robert Mueller, who everyone can't question. He made some mistakes, actually, in my view, and at some point, if we want to talk about those, we can.
All of next week.
But I think it's big news when Mueller says it. You know how the press does.
Yeah.
It's an event.
Right.
Oh, I've got to cover this event. Okay, I knew everything about the event.
Yeah,
right?
I was just saying that it also became a weird thing yesterday. As last night there was some indication that the leadership in Congress, the Dems, might stand by the idea that no, impeachment is off the table. What I thought was kind of amazing was the idea that, well, we have to wait for the Mueller report. Everyone remembers that. We've got to wait for the Mueller report. And we can't talk about impeachment. No to impeachment now. It's not worth it. And we got to wait for the Mueller report. And the Mueller report comes out, and then their reaction to it is, well, we knew everything in it, so we can't impeach now because we already knew everything in it, which also, by the way, means that earlier when I said we can't impeach because we didn't yet know all the things, or we knew it. We've known it all along, and we didn't impeach when we first learned it, and now that it's reconfirmed, we also won't impeach. I guess that's strangely consistent.
An official matter. I mean, you don't know something just because it's reported.
Yeah,
in a newspaper, true. You know it when there's an official report that says
it is evidence that you were right, but is not proof.
No, exactly. I mean, it's not the same thing. I think that it does make a difference. And I think another thing that makes a difference about impeachment is Bob Mueller saying you got to impeach him. I mean, people are beating around the bush on this, but that's what he said. In my view, you don't think so? He said, hey, I can't do anything because the Justice Department says I can't indict him. But you, Congress, you could do a lot of things.
You could. Yeah, he does say that. I mean, he says so explicitly.
He says it explicitly. I mean, and Robert Mueller is basically saying you need to impeach him. Joe Scarborough is saying you need to impeach him.
Yeah.
For Christ's sakes. Jonathan Alter is saying you need to impeach him.
Bob
Eugene Robinson is saying you need to impeach him. For once, you can't say it's the Beltway media wringing their hands. Even the Washington Post in its editorial yesterday.
Yes, true.
Said it. So there's not this big groundswell of people telling, no, that's outrageous and extreme.
Yes.
The opposite. They're saying, you know what? You really got to take a good look at this.
Good point. And a good point for me to at this point to jump in and say, I think I was wrong yesterday. I mean, in my cynicism, approaching it first thing in the morning and saying, well, everybody knows how this game is going to go. The bar is going to dictate the line. They'll put it up on the chyrons, and then they'll run their headlines before the report is released, and then everybody will pretend it's too late and the story's been written. And they I think all our yelling about it and predicting the play may have caused them to call an audible and say, oh, we can't do that. We're busted. or they
I
may
think
have
a
had
little bit-
integrity. I don't know which.
I know. I think you're right. The working the refs thing worked, but
Maybe.
also I think Barr was so over the top.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, he was universally condemned by anyone with a half a brain. I mean, I don't know what happened on right-wing Twitter.
Except for that wing that's never going to...
Yeah, right. Well, we'll take a brief break and organize our thoughts for the last segment here. We might as well, I mean, we're going to keep going. It's going to be Mueller all day long. There's nothing else that we can
I don't know what else
do.
is going on. I mean, I can't even tell you what else is happening.
All right. Well, we'll be right back in 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the completely exonerated Kagro in the Morning Show. We're here with Armando still, and we're discussing the Mueller report. I don't know if you guys are interested in this. I don't know if you heard. And there really are other stories, and if it wasn't for the fact that it was Friday, we'd probably be discussing them tomorrow, but they'll all disappear over the weekend anyway. It should be an interesting weekend. Trump is all wound up. He's going to Mar-a-Lago. I understand it's going to rain. He can't... golf. You can't get a massage.
Myself, actually. Well, I'm in the vicinity of Mar-a-Lago. I flew down this morning.
Tell him you want to use the pool.
I'll apply for work and tell him I'm undocumented.
Oh, yeah. Bring any electronics you can fit in a bag. Bring a Geiger counter. See what they think of that.
That's right.
Where were we? Yes. So, one, they should impeach the guy. Two, you were saying during the break, I think it's now a question of what do the House Dems do with this?
I think so. I think the consensus, frankly, and maybe more, maybe it coalesced more quickly than you would have thought. But again, for whatever reason, a lot of people who knew everything that was basically in the report, when they got it from Mueller, it changed and said, "Wow, now that I've read the report," they said, "Well, almost everything, the whole Don McGahn thing, which I thought they were going to redact, but I think he had no way of doing it because apparently McGahn did not appear before the grand jury, nor was his testimony presented to the grand jury. So Mueller was smarter than I give him credit for, but yet he made a mistake, which again I won't belabor here. It has to do with the application of the campaign finance law and whether there needs to be a tacit or express agreement. This is the weeds. We can save that for another day. But I just feel like there's a critical mass. Joe Scarborough this morning, for better or worse, is an important person in that world. Yeah. Basically came out and said, he told a story Paul Simon told him. He says, sometimes, when you think you're losing, you're winning. And when you think you're winning, you're losing. And his argument from that was some people may think it's not politically smart to go for impeachment and talk about what's in this report all the time, but they're wrong. And he said basically run on this for 18 months. Okay.
I'm good with it. There's a lot that's familiar with this, and I guess this started to come out yesterday, as I was saying, I feel like it's, 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 all over again. But one of the things that brought me back today is the revival of if we impeach, we'll just get President Pence thing, where I was like, don't you mean President Cheney? Because I think that's what you told me last time, too. And the answer is, quite honestly, certainly with Pence, anyway, I'll take it. If it's
Trump should not be president. They're just, Grassley or think of the worst other Republican you can think of, and that's 100 times better than Trump being president. He's crazy, and now he's going nuts, and you never know. They'll start a war, he'll fire missiles, he'll tell Barr to arrest people. There was an interesting thing that I just saw before I got on with you. Trump, they had a surrogates call for Trump's people with Emmett Flood, who's one of Trump's lawyers in the White House.
And Diamond and Silk.
And Diamond and Silk. And I don't know if it was one of Diamond or Silk who said, you know what you need to do? Arrest Hillary and arrest all of them.
Yes, I believe it was Silk. I don't know.
But, here's the thing. Trump will hear that and said, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to tell Barr to arrest everybody.
Oh, well, it was his idea.
Yeah.
So.
And Bill Barr will do it. Goes back to my conversation yesterday. That's why, in many respects, I don't think this notion of, well, now let's just, let's not, whatever. I don't know what the House Dem idea here of not doing something is. But the flip side of the coin is you're going to let them say, okay, you think Lindsey Graham's not going to hold his hearings on the investigators, and you don't think Bill Barr is going to issue a report? And, and it looks like this DOJ IG is in the tank too. He's going to come out with a report attacking the investigators and Michael Steele and the dossier and just repeating all the Trumpist stuff.
Okay.
They're not going to stop. So why are you going to stop? You have Mueller on your side.
Yeah.
Use it.
I guess so. I mean, I don't see no reason to. I think we should escalate in kind, by the way, and say, maybe this is good interference to run for the whole thing. Great idea, Silk. Let's arrest George W. Bush and Dick Cheney.
Right. They're traitors.
Why? But they were.
There's no statute of limitations on treason.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with. I know. It's just I forgot to do it last time, so I'm thinking we should do it now.
Catching up.
You brought me up to speed on that. So a couple of other things, by the way, also of interest. Some on things we already mentioned. One, I just was scrolling through my own tweets trying to remind myself of things. One we mentioned earlier, but here also a tweet from Dan Pfeiffer yesterday, mentioning the subtext here in this particular item was that Mueller had concluded that Don Jr., who was a senior campaign official, was too dumb to know he was breaking the law, which is, again, amazing. But I forgot to mention, what a great run of PR for Penn and Wharton. The dumbest president in history with his really great brain who transferred into Wharton and graduated at the top of his class / not even close, depending on. And then his son, Don, of course, goes, although, I mean, I guess you could chalk that up to legacy admissions. It certainly wasn't, he didn't buy his way in. Of all the people who bought their way into schools, Trump would not buy his way into Penn. Would not.
I would say this. I think the grandfather might have bought him in.
Maybe, yes. So here you go. I mean, grandfather bought.
Fred Trump had money.
Yes.
It's just that Donald Trump Sr. squandered most of it.
Yes. All right. Oh, he didn't keep it all. He tried to, but he squandered it. He lost it, and he wasn't going to spend it on Don. He wouldn't even cover Don's Cub Scout registration fee himself. Maybe it was Eric. Anyway. But yeah, it's amazing. So there you have it. Another Wharton grad. Now, maybe this is a claim to fame for them. So for insider trading, it's going to be fantastic. Wharton, our grads are too dumb to be insider traders. You cannot harass them.
At some point there will be a Donald Trump presidential library, even if he gets impeached and removed.
I guess.
You think Wharton will house it?
They're too dumb not to. I don't know. Maybe. But I was scrolling and looking for something else, actually, and now I'm forgetting what I was looking for. But
it was Dan Pfeiffer said something.
So yeah, that's what I found along the way. But
okay.
Yeah, I would have made notes for myself, but you know how the president is about notes.
Keep looking for what you're scrolling for. I'll talk a little bit about this Don Jr. thing about being too stupid.
Okay.
I think officially and more elegantly, he said he didn't know that this was a violation of the law. And I don't believe that for a second. And I say to you that doesn't excuse anybody This is a guy who went with the campaign chairman and the son-in-law to a meeting which he intended to violate the law. Donald Trump Jr. at the Trump Tower meeting, his intention was to violate the law.
Yes.
All right? And Paul Manafort's intention was to violate the law.
Yes, he certainly, I mean, you can't accuse him of not knowing. Well, I mean, he may not have ever known, but he's supposed to have known. He's the sophisticated investor here.
And Jared Kushner's handling 72 portfolios. Come on.
He's just an idiot. I mean, he hit a great spot in that thing, too, yesterday about he didn't know the name of the Russian. What's the name of that guy from Russia who talks to us about government? I need to talk to him. Yeah, him. Right.
Kissak.
Right.
I don't know. I've never met him before.
What am I supposed to do in the Middle East again? Peace. Ah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's something else. But the point being, I don't believe for a second that he didn't know it was a violation of the law. And I don't believe Mueller believes that either. I think Mueller just chickened out, to be honest with you. I know, St. Robert, I'm not supposed to say that, but I think he chickened out.
Yeah, well, I think so. But I mean, of course, if he thinks he's throwing it to Congress for like the ultimate
not for Donald Trump Jr. Not for Donald Trump
Oh, yes,
Jr.
right. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, that's right. Correct. I'm sorry. And I think I brought that up earlier. As I wondered whether he thought, I just don't need that hassle, or do I believe that that's a red line for Trump? But everyone knows Trump's real red line is...
I think he believed it was a red line.
Yeah.
And I think, for example, he didn't ask to interview Donald Trump Jr. or Ivanka or Jared.
Yeah, I guess not.
Why not?
I think it might just be there's probably a number of reasons, but ultimately it comes down to I made a decision not to cover every base here, and that might have been. He
made a decision that he would respect the red line.
Yeah, it could be that.
In fact,
it could be time.
You
it
have
could
to
be.
Look at it that he did
stuffy.
Not get involved in the financial crisis.
Yes, that too brought up, and good point made. And I saved another tweet that was Grudge, who tweeted that. Yeah, there's nothing in here about finances that's
there isn't.
Left out, and I think that
could be a referral or what have you.
I think just Mueller's very stuffy when it comes to following the rules, and he might have also categorized Don Jr. that way and saying, this is outside of I'm focusing on the President of the United States. I don't need to deal with his children. They're all criminals, and they'll get their due in
he dealt with Manafort.
Yeah.
He dealt with Gates, and he dealt with
only grown-ups.
Stone.
I mean, John Jr. is a grown-up. We should not dismiss it because his happens to be Trump's child.
Yeah,
right.
You know what I mean?
But I don't know. There's some part of me thinks that Mueller thought it was beneath him. That's true, and he doesn't even speak one language correctly.
Exactly.
I remember now what I was looking for.
Look, I think it was a tough job. Mueller apparently was very thorough, but he, when Maggie Haberman wrote her story, and he said about red lines, and the New York Times said, "Hey, is that a red line?" And Trump said, "Absolutely, that's a red line."
Yeah. What's a red line? It's that. Yeah, I'm sure he whispered.
He might have taken it to heart. I think there was a little bit of timidity. Again, maybe it's defensible. Maybe in the larger scheme of things, the way Mueller handled it is better. Josh Marshall actually defended it that way. He said, "Look how restrained he was."
Yeah.
That's a good thing Mueller was doing it, because look how restrained he is. No one can think he's a wild,
right. Well, they'll accuse him of anything anyway. So,
that's
evidence to the contrary
notwithstanding. I agree with Josh. I'm just telling you what the theory was.
Yes, you do.
Ken Starr had no compunction. He was asked, "Hey, I'm gonna trap Clinton in a perjury trap at a civil deposition. Do I have jurisdiction, Janet Reno?" Janet Reno said, "Sure, go do it."
All right. I did find, by the way, what I was looking for. First, there's a comment from our frequent commenter, Michael Musson. There are several, but I'm going to jump to this one here because it's fun, for one thing, but also brings us to another important point. Mueller, he says, couldn't even definitively debunk the P-tape, which is interesting all by itself, and true. And it actually kind of gets a sidled mention here. He found communications, and it's almost like he was trolling, joking here. He found communications about flow, for one thing, and tapes out of Russia, but cannot establish the content of those tapes. I believe that was considered to be the weakest allegation of the dossier, and it isn't even definitively false. Now, there was information, as I said, about it, and Empty Wheel had noticed it too, and tweeted, "There is a P tape," in all caps with exclamation points, but it's fake. Both sides underestimate the degree, she says, to which Russia targeted Trump too with disinformation. The implication here being that the Russians were trying to make Trump think that they had a P tape, even if they didn't, which is an interesting question as to exactly why they wanted to do that. But more interesting, she includes 2 clips from out of the report and doesn't comment on this. I had to make this comment, but here's the clips she's got. First, Comey's, I guess in a footnote here, footnote 112, right? Comey's 1717 memo, January 7, 17, memorandum at 1. Comey, and also I guess a citation to a bunch of Comey memos here. Comey's briefing included the Steele reporting's unverified allegation that the Russians had compromising tapes of the president involving conduct when he was a private citizen during a 2013 trip to Moscow for the Miss Universe pageant. During the 2016 presidential campaign, a similar claim may have reached candidate Trump. On October 30th, 2016, Michael Cohen received a text from Russian businessman Georgy, oh my goodness, this is, I guess, a Georgian guy. Okay. Georgy, you're never going to believe this. The name is, I'm going to spell it, RT, so you see how my problem is. RTSKHILADZE. That Iladze is the end. That much I figure, and that's like sounds like I think it's Georgian origin. Risk, I got no idea how to pronounce that. Ritskilashla. I couldn't even tell you. My God. RTSKH. Georgy said he texted Cohen the following: "Stopped flow of tapes from Russia, but not sure if there's anything else. Just so you know." Now, it continues on and then says that there's a October 30th text message. That is the text message to Cohen. He goes on to say that I guess this guy spoke to somebody, maybe Mueller directly, and said that tapes referred to compromising tapes of Trump rumored to be held by persons associated with the Russian real estate conglomerate Crocus Group, which had helped host the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Russia. Cohen said he spoke to Trump about the issue after receiving the texts from this guy. And he said that he was told that the tapes were fake, but he did not communicate that they were fake to Cohen. So Empty Wheel takes that and says, how interesting that they don't bother to tell him that they're fake. It's almost as if they were trying to plant misinformation about his vulnerabilities with Trump, and that, like, in other words, the Russians would take care of this bad problem, and not mentioning that they were fake. But what goes unmentioned here is the bit at the end here, that the tapes were rumored to be held by persons associated with the Russian real estate conglomerate Crocus Group. Does everybody remember the Crocus Group? Because we read about them. Crocus Group is the Agalarovs. The Agalarovs had the P tape, and they arranged the Trump Tower meeting in 2016 and went there and sat there. They arranged the whole thing, and they arranged the Moscow pageant, and Amin Agalarov, the singer, Amin was wow, says, tweets Trump. The Agalarovs, who are supposedly their friends in all this, we're setting up the meeting so that you can get dirt on Clinton, are rumored to be the ones holding the P tape. What the? Unbelievable. This guy, I mean, wow.
That is unbelievable. Yeah.
How vulnerable is Trump to blackmail? He thinks his friends are, or he thinks the people who have the blackmail on him are his friends. He's totally vulnerable to all this. It's worse than anybody ever thought.
I agree.
These are my good friends. I love you. I'm going to let you sing at my pageant. Yeah. What else?
There was a story, and you probably know the facts because you know everything about her. Hope Hicks
How does she
got
do
a
it?
call from something.
Now we know how she does
Putin's cell.
Yeah, Russian oligarchs are calling her at 3 a.m. on her cell phone. Now we know how she does it. She responds to everybody. They were right. That's why they loved her. So the whole thing about how does Hope Hicks do it was she was so responsive to the press. She lets Russian oligarchs call her at 3 a.m. for reasons unknown.
I wonder what that story was. Again, I confess I have not read the report.
Okay.
I count on Marcy to do it. By the way, Marcy was
I really
great.
have to leave it to others.
Yeah, I do.
I agree.
I can't close read. She knows everything, so I wait for
yes.
her. And she was great with Chris Hayes last night, by the way. They had a really, really nice segment.
I'll have to check that one out. I'm pretty sure I put this away somewhere.
Yeah. To me, the big story is how are Democrats going to position this? They're going to have to investigate. Nadler issued a subpoena for the full report. They're going to call in Mueller. I call in McGahn. I call in everybody that's cited in the piece and make them all testify live.
Oh, absolutely.
And say it all over again.
I'd call Jeff Sessions.
So we could see it.
I'm calling Jeff Sessions as well, and nobody really wants to hear from him. But I'm doing it because they're American heroes. I don't know. I saw that, discussion and like, well, certainly no objection to my calling an American hero to testify about his heroism, right? I want to hear McGahn say this. He should absolutely come and spill the beans.
Absolutely.
They've already nothing to protect. They've already spilled.
Testimony.
Yeah.
Read all the key testimony again.
Right.
Can you read the first 3 pages of your deposition, please? Read them. Look at the camera.
Right.
So the American people can see you say those words.
No, they should absolutely do that. Where's the Taiwanese animation people when I need them? This is let's see. I want to throw this one in here too, into the mix. Daniel Dale, always worth listening to, and I should really. I'm going to look through his timeline over the weekend. I'm guessing that he will give me the best bullet pointing of the hottest items.
Yeah, he's
in all this.
Good.
And the one I grabbed was just to shift to another area of the investigation. Mueller report here. Though, I guess this is his summary of it, and then the actual text which he attaches. Though phone provider records show that Steve Bannon and Eric Prince exchanged dozens of text messages around the time of the Seychelles meeting, which is suspicious enough all by itself. That Steve Bannon is even involved. I mean, I guess we figured that he was, but his name didn't come up in the Seychelles situation. But despite the fact that phone provider records show that they exchanged dozens of texts, there were no messages available for investigators to read on their phones, and both men said they didn't know why that was. So this is just another thing. This is destruction of evidence as well, on top of all of the other. So, by the way, I can't prove obstruction of justice. I don't know. Well, why is Steve Bannon talking to Eric Prince at all, ever, about anything? And 2, arranging for a meeting with Mr. Bonesaw in the Seychelles on top of all that. And then both of them, weirdly, though the phone providers say they definitely exchange messages, have no messages to and from one another. That's obstruction on its face. You're both under arrest. The clip from the report here simply says, the conflicting accounts provided by Bannon and Prince could not be independently clarified by reviewing their communications because neither one was able to produce any of the messages they exchanged in the time period surrounding the Seychelles meeting. I hope everybody remembers what that was about because we haven't got time to go into it. But we have discussed it. Prince's phone contained no text messages prior to March 2017. Amazingly enough, though provider records indicate that he and Bannon exchanged dozens of messages. Prince denied deleting any messages, but claimed he did not know why there were no messages on his device prior to March 2017. Bannon's devices similarly contained no messages in the relevant time period, and Bannon also stated he did not know why the messages did not appear on his device. Bannon told the office that during both the months before and after the Seychelles meeting, he regularly used his personal BlackBerry and personal email for work-related communications. Remember, but his emails. And by the way, they're deleted and acid-washed from his phone. And by the way, he filled his bathtub with acid, so I don't know why that happened.
It's unbelievable.
So he took no steps to preserve these work communications. Russia, if you're listening, find the texts between Steve Bannon and Eric Prince. But
it's
okay for
washed
me.
That phone, did he? No,
I don't know. Apparently, that was one of Trump's favorite refrains, besides the butthurt emails.
Yes, it's Bleach Bit, by the way.
Oh yeah, right.
Is the app actually? There's no
Acid
app
washed
involved.
is what the jeans I wouldn't let Ivanka wear.
So funny. Anyway, I'm going to give you the last few minutes of your show.
Very good.
I'm going to declare war on Easter and Passover by wishing you a happy holiday weekend.
I knew it. You've destroyed it all. My religious freedom has been destroyed. Thank you. Same to you. Have a good one. Yes. Try and take some time off, but don't really, so that we can have a good show on Monday. All right. Let's see. I'll throw you a couple more of yesterday's observations and tweets, and maybe I'll just read their summations rather than their inclusions as well. Let's see. Oh, this was very interesting, and now I have to read the inclusion. Judd Legum noting that Trump started running numerous versions, of course, of this ad on Facebook after the release of the Mueller report. It contains numerous lies, which are used to convince people to donate money. And this is the sort of thing he is circulating to people. After more than 2 years and 25 million taxpayer dollars spent, although he uses both the dollar sign and the word dollars, the Mueller report proves what I have been saying since day one: no collusion, no obstruction, complete exoneration. Democrats worked with the fake news media for 2 years orchestrating this nasty witch hunt to use our government as a weapon to take, I'm going to stop even with that. You can see that every bit of it is disproven by the report itself, of course, but the fact, it's actually the most interesting thing about it is that he's out on Facebook all over again, running multiple versions of the same thing, and it's insane. And, of course, they're using Facebook in exactly the same way that they did during the campaign and with exactly the same ends in mind. Let's see. Another one that, the bearded guy. I knew we've almost forgot. We promised we were going to get to that. Who was the bearded guy? And the answer comes from Ken Bensinger, a reporter with BuzzFeed News, who tweets, fun fact, the bearded guy behind Barr is named Ed O'Callahan. Oh, this is amazing. I don't have much time for this, but another callback to early days on the show here, and longtime listeners will go, oh my God, unless they already read this yesterday when I tweeted it out. Fun fact, the bearded guy is Ed O'Callahan, and before coming to the DOJ, I guess that's where he works now, he was the defense lawyer for one of the most abjectly corrupt FIFA officials ever. The goddamn soccer guys. Can you believe this? Now, in this case, was Jeffrey Webb, who pleaded guilty, apparently. And I don't know that guy, but I may or may not be connected to the half a dozen other corrupt FIFA officials who just coincidentally, by the way, in case you're interested, lived in Trump Tower, for God's sake. But once again, the connection in all this is that Steele of the Steele dossier was one of the lead investigators internationally of the FIFA corruption web. And it was his work on FIFA corruption and Mueller's cooperation in prosecuting a lot of that corruption here in the United States, by the way. But Steele's work on unraveling the FIFA web led to a lot of his knowledge of Russian organized crime. Probably largely because at the time Russia was involved in an overt campaign to win the World Cup hosting duties, which they did do because there was so much money. What could be a better skim than concessions at a World Cup? All cash, yada, yada, or even, they could even skim credit cards along the way. So unsurprisingly, an investigation of FIFA corruption will lead to an investigation of Russian organized crime and the inability to draw a distinction between oligarchs, mobsters, and the government, such as it is of Russia. It's all pretty well integrated, and for good reason if you're the guy organizing the crime. Anyway, that's why he knows all of these people. And the fact that a good portion of them decided to launder a good portion of the money that they got from corrupt Russians and others around the world through their FIFA connections was laundered through luxury real estate in Trump Tower. Probably no coincidence either. They learned from the corrupt individuals they were working with, chiefly in Russia, that was a easy and economically sensible way of laundering your money. Plus, it gave you a fun place to live and an easy way for them to contact you without even going outside, so they could evade detection by the FBI, except for the fact that the FBI had them under surveillance inside Trump Tower. And that's probably the spying that Donald Trump is talking about. Not spying on him, but spying on the mobsters that he sheltered inside his golden idiot palace. Time for me to go. Time for me to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and time for me to tell you that all of the things he has for you are too numerous for me to mention as I greedily gobble up the time that's been allotted to me. But I promise you, more good stuff
From
to come.
Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Let me do this. I'm going to skip down to the part we almost always have to eliminate and tell you about the international news here. All the stuff we discussed is going to be covered again and in more detail, but check this out. 3 world-class climbers are missing and presumed dead from an avalanche in the Canadian Rocky Mountains. Hope they're found so that they can come back and read the Mueller report.